the book of Isaiah, chapter 34, starting at verse 1, and it reads, it says, "Come near, ye nations, to hear, and hearken, ye people, let the earth hear, and all that is therein, the world, and all things that come forth of it. For the indignation of the Lord is upon all nations, and his fury is upon all their armies. He hath utterly destroyed them, he hath delivered them to the slaughter." Let's open up this epistle by giving all praise, glory, and honor that is due to Yahawah, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, RAWCHAA, QADASH. That is all praises, blessings, honors be to the Most High. His true name is Yahawah in the Paleo Hebrew. BAHASHAM simply means in the name. His only begotten Son, whom the world ignorantly and fraudulently calls Jesus, his name is YAHAWASHI. So we say all praises to Yahawah, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI. And double honors to the elders, the bishops, and the apostles of the great millstone who taught me this truth. Shalom to the Lord's elect. Shalom to the hopeful elect. Much respect to the brothers that teach, preach, and prophesy in the true doctrine of Yahawah B'Shem Yahushai. There could only be one truth. And if I didn't say so, shalom to the Lord's elect and shalom to the hopeful elect. This is your brother Itazawah. I'm here with a very brief epistle through the spirit and power of Yahawah B'Shem Yahushai. I just want to bring out something here in the in prophecy regarding the geopolitical news. So this lady before you, you can see her with this smile on her face. She is the current president of the European Commission. Her name is Ursula von der Leyen, and she's German politician, physician. But now her current role is the president of European Commission. And why does this matter? Because within Europe itself, you have many of these countries that are for the war, and many countries are against the war. So they are essentially split. As it says in the book of Mark, the 3rd chapter, let's go there really quickly actually. Let's go to Mark chapter 3. We'll start at verse 25. It says, "And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand." This is the house of Esau. "And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan rise up against himself, he be divided. He cannot stand, but have an end." So these nations here, through the spirit and power of Yahawah B'Shem Yahushai, it is coming to an end. Now the precept just comes to mind here. Let me just grab it really quickly. This is the book of 2nd Ezra, chapter 6 and verse 6. It says, "Then did I consider these things, and all they were made through me alone, and through none other. By me also they shall be ended, and by no other." So the Lord says all good things must come to an end. And this is where we're looking at the end of their rulership. And one of the telltale signs is the division. They are divided. So this article here, this relates to the title of this one, just to show you. It says, Europe declined to grab Russia assets. Will Ukraine raise funds some other way? Because they just recently, they all met, these European leaders, the figureheads, and this is what they were deciding to do. It says Europe decides whether to steal Russia's money. It says, "Today there will be a meeting in Brussels where the European Union will decide whether to steal Russian 210 billion sovereign wealth funds. If the EU does that, companies around the world are expected to withdraw funds from Europe because they can no longer trust that government to act within the law." 100%. It says, "When Russia launched its special military operation inside Ukraine, European governments clutched their pearls and threw a hissy fit. Then they decided that they had some right to freeze Russian sovereign wealth funds." And all across Europe, they were freezing Russians' assets, whether it was from the oligarchs or Russian companies. It says this is a problem. Russia did not violate any European law, and as such, it finds its funds cannot be frozen or seized. That's because they all band together, and put Russia as the boogeyman. It says those little factual details didn't matter. The streaking Europeans they froze Russian money anyways. This sent a shock across the bow of every entity that does business in or with Europe, because they're not playing by the rules. That's what it's basically saying. It says if the EU can simply decide they have some right to grab someone else's money. This is Esau Edom. This is how he gets down. Now look at Trump today, seizing all the oil of Venezuela, saying it is their oil. See, if the EU can simply decide that they have some right to grab someone's money, despite no law having been violated. This is what the scripture says, and they covet fields and take them by violence. See, because by doing these things, they think that they were gonna cripple the Russian economy, but they don't realize the spirit of YAHAWASHI. It is lifting up the Russians, because YAHAWASHI is using Russia to take down America and its allies. You can get that account, many accounts, but the main one I'm referring to is in Isaiah the 13 verse 17 onward, Jeremiah 50 and Jeremiah 51, Ezekiel 38 as well, where it says the EU had no legal authority to do that either. It is Russia's money, not Europe. Europe has no legal standing to do any of this, but they went ahead and did it anyways. What does that sound like? Who's doing all this madness right now? Always Esau. This is right across the world. This is what he's doing. It says, as the fighting between Russia and Ukraine continued, Europe became more shrill, like a woman whose pantyhose are in a twist. Even though Europe had been supporting Ukraine financially and militarily, Russia was still winning. And you can see, I said this a long time ago, through the spirit and power of YAHAWASHI, that all the money, all the funds, everything that they were given to Ukraine, it was at a losing cost, because Yahawah BAHASHAM YAHWAHSHI is raising up the modern day Medes to take down Babylon and its allies. It says, here we are, nearly 4 years into the conflict, and this started in the time of this current conflict was when Biden was in power. So now Trump is coming in, trying to say we're going to stop the war, we're going to stop the war, we're going to stop sending money. But meanwhile, they're still sending they're selling their equipment, supplying them with all type of munitions as well. But it's all lip service. It says, so Europe decided that they, instead of merely illegally freezing Russia's money, and instead of merely legally pledging dividends from the money as collateral for loans to Ukraine, now the EU wants to actually take Russia's money and use it for Ukraine. See, this is what they want to do, because they need that war. All these countries from France and Germany, a lot of these countries are in a rapid decline. They are broke. It says a number of countries within EU have pointed out that any such attempt would require unanimous consent of all countries in the EU, and several countries made know they absolutely refuse to engage in this theft. Woo! You see that? Refused. It says, so the EU changed the rules so that the unanimous consent is suddenly no longer required. That's Esau Edom, always changing the goalposts. It says today the EU will meet to discuss this matter, and the outcome will have massive effects. Seeing this coming, Russia filed a lawsuit in Russian court, demanding their money be returned. That case is now pending in Moscow. When Russia wins, and they will win because the EU has no legal right to do what it's doing, the court will allow Russia to seize European money, which is now retaliatory, frozen inside Russia. But it is not European government's money. It is European companies' money. See, this is where the confusion comes in. It says Russia may confiscate 1.27 billion in Western assets in response to the use of frozen assets to aid Ukraine, writes Financial Times. This threat was alarm countries such as Belgium, Italy, and Austria, and is being considered at the EU level, sources say. According to Kiev School of Economics, the Kremlin has already confiscated or frozen the assets of at least 32 Western companies due to previous dispute, resulting in losses of at least 57 billion. Ouch. Russia may confiscate local subsidiaries of European companies in accordance with a decree signed by Putin in September, which introduced an accelerated nationalization procedure. The Kremlin justified this decision as a way to quick respond to hostile actions, such as the confiscation of EU assets. Belgian officials believe that the Ecoclair will be the first victim of Russia's potentially retaliatory measures, as its clients' assets worth about 17 billion are still blocked. They and are at risk. See, it says publication writes that 2,315 Western companies are still actively operating in Russia. Those include Russian branches of banks such as Austria's Raiffeisen and Italy Unicredit, which made significant profits during the war and cannot withdraw them due to a ban on dividend payments. According to Kiev School of Economics, foreign companies earned 19.5 billion in profits in Russia last year. The confiscation of Russian assets could affect Russian investors who share in Russian companies traded in the stock exchange before the invasion, as well as Western companies with stakes in Russian corporations or operating in the country. So this is from yesterday. So, oh yes, this is Viktor Orban right here. It says, seizing Russian assets and handed them to Ukraine would mean EU marching into war. 100%. This is a very long article here, but it says the video it's on trending on X. It says we will not leave the European Council today without a decision on the financing of Ukraine for the next 2 years. Ursula von der Leyen. So let's go now. I said all that to say this. Let's go here. This is the current updated one. This is today's date. It says Europe declines to grab Russian assets, will raise Ukraine funds some other way. So now listen to this here. I have a video to play. Let's get there. This is fair use, contrary to 107 of the Copyright Act. Allowance is made for fair use for the purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarships, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. So now watch this. This is owned by APT News. Fair use.
There is a very important piece of news from Brussels. There was the failure. It was a real failure to take the assets. They cannot steal them, but they're trying. But still, they cannot do this. Well, stealing is not really correct definition for that. Stealing, this is when someone is doing it secretly, and they are doing it openly. This is a robbery.
This is a robbery.
Why they fail to do this? Why they fail to implement this robbery? Because the consequences can be really harsh for the robbers. Why is that? It's really hard to do that, because they declare that they're not going to rob it, to take it. The idea is to make a credit using our assets, but you cannot just give out a loan. This will make consequences for the budget of a country, and it increases the budget debt of every country. If someone gives a loan, even secured by our foreign assets, it must be reflected in the budget of a country that does it.
For example, in France, the public debt is 120%, and ours is at 17%. And our budget deficit is 2.6%. Next year is going to be 1.6%. In France, it is 6% per annum. So, and now they will assume additional liabilities, and it'll be quite hard to pass such a budget. And all these are the reasons for the difficulty of taking decisions related to the robbery of someone else's assets, but there will be graver consequences for those who might endeavor that. This will not be a blow to their image, but this will subvert all the confidence with the euro area. Actually, very many countries store their foreign reserves in the eurozone. Many of those having spare money, like the oil-producing countries, if they have a look at what might be happening, they will have doubts, and they already have doubts and concerns. But what if this happens? You know, well begun, it can be further replicated, they might think. Now, some people dislike the conduct of the special military operation and the fight against neo-Nazism in Ukraine. And next, someone might not like the fight, the struggle with the LGBT movement. And the Muslim countries have stringent laws to this respect, and this might be another pretext.
I'm gonna pause it right there. This is what I always say through the spirit, and I always say Putin is playing chess while these other nations are playing checkers. He is so calculated in his movements. He's the complete polar opposite of what you see in America and the Western rulers. He is calm, cool, and collective. This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 49 and verse 7. It says, concerning Edom, for thus said the Lord of hosts, is wisdom no more in Teman? Is counsel perished from the prudent? Is their wisdom vanished? Temanites are Edomites. This is what the Lord is saying. Is their wisdom vanished? Is wisdom no more in Teman? You know, because this is showing that the judgment against the people of Edom, it's falling apart right before your eyes. They're losing wisdom, good counsel. Like they keep changing the rules as it fits their narrative, because you cannot put a square into a circle. You see? So is wisdom no more in Teman? This is what the Lord is asking, you know, through the prophet Jeremiah. So let's go here, because like I said, Putin is playing higher stakes. It says, the European Council met for hours yesterday in Brussels trying to decide on how to fund their support of Ukraine and its conflict with Russia, and looking to grab Russia's sovereign wealth funds to do it. At issue was some 210 billion worth of Russian sovereign wealth funds, which have been invested by Russia in Europe, which Europe illegally froze when the conflict broke out. Over the past few years, Europe somehow decided it had some right to pledge its dividends from those Russian investments as collateral for loans to Ukraine, so as it to help the Ukrainians fight Russia. And that's why Putin made that comment. It is not theft, it is a robbery. And that's why he's smiling, because he knows that there will be consequences. This is what he did say, there will be consequences to pay. It says, yesterday, the United States dashed Europe's delusion about taking Russia's funds. The U.S. informed Europe that Russia's money would be part of any negotiated settlement of the Ukraine conflict. This would mean Europe would find itself on the hook for the collateral it pledged, and if Europe proceeded to grab the entire 210 billion, it would be on the hook for that too. And this goes to show you that how America is controlling the NATO and EU, those countries. It says last night EU Commission, that's why America is deemed as what? The hammer of the whole earth. In the Bible, it says President Ursula von der Leyen announced that Europe had decided that they could provide another 90 billion in assistance to Ukraine that Europe will raise from capital markets. So the Europeans are going into Hawk, is Hawk, right? Into Hawk for Ukraine. It says the tune of about 90 billion. Oh yeah, so it just goes to show you, right? And another article here we're going to bring out and we close out soon. This is a Slovakian Prime Minister, Robert Fico. Look what he says. EU member rejects further funding for Ukraine military. A house divided, a kingdom divided. The conflict between Moscow and Kiev cannot be resolved on the battlefield. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico has said Slovakia will not provide further funding for Ukraine's military because the conflict cannot be settled on the battlefield. Prime Minister Robert Fico has stated. It says Fico, who survived an assassination attempt by pro-Ukraine activists in 2024, was speaking after EU leaders failed to reach agreement on a plan to use frozen Russian assets to back a controversial 90 billion euros, which is 105 billion US, I believe it is, loan for Kiev. Instead, member states agreed to issue joint debt by borrowing on capital markets to provide Kiev with short-term funding. Slovakia will not be part of any military loan for Ukraine, and we reject further financing, including the resources of the Slovak Republic of military needs, Fico told reporters. So it just goes to show you, man, they are all divided. Let's go here to the book of Obadiah, chapter 1, and we're going to start at verse 6. It says, how are the things of Esau searched out? Through this word. The Lord is revealing them, as it says in Jeremiah 49, verse 10, but I have made Esau bare. How are the things of Esau searched out? And Esau is a so-called white man today, the Idumeans, the ones who's ruling the earth. This is his kingdom. How are his hidden things sought up? And I said so-called because so-called is pseudoscience. There's no such thing as a white person. There's no such thing as a black person. See, verse 7, it says, all of the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. These countries are about to go at it. Physically, they're about to go at it. It says, the men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and have prevailed against thee. They have eat thy bread and have laid a wound unto thee. There is none understanding in him. See, none understanding him, but the point is all these nations that were at one point in league with each other are now what? Just split it apart. That is prophecy. That's from the will of the YAHAWASHI. But like I said, I just want to bring out something really quick to the spirit and power of YAHAWASHI. Hope they've been edified. Want to give all praise, glory, and honor due to Yahawah, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM QADASH. Double honors to the elders, the bishops, and the apostles of the great millstone who taught me this truth. Shalom.